You know that moment when your life shatters, but no one hears the glass break? It was our 10th anniversary. Mark promised me Bali, white sand, sunsets, us. But when I opened his iPad to check our itinerary, there it was. 2 first-class tickets. His name and hers. The worst part? He'd booked it with my credit card points. I should have cried. Screamed. Instead, I did something better. Because Mark made one fatal mistake. He forgot about Captain Daniel Reyes, the pilot he'd fired for being too old to fly. And I never forget a face. So when I upgraded my seat, I made sure it was right next to Daniel. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when a woman stops falling and starts flying. The lie. I ironed his shirts for the trip. The other woman probably wouldn't. The steam rose from the iron, curling in the air like the lies Mark had been feeding me for months. Or maybe years. I pressed down harder, smoothing out the wrinkles in his crisp white dress shirt, the one he'd wear when he boarded the plane to Bali. Our anniversary trip. The one he was now taking with her. I should have known something was wrong when he insisted on booking the flights himself. Mark never handled travel plans. That was always my job. But he'd been so adamant. I've got it, Claire. Don't worry about it. Turns out, I should have worried. His iPad sat on the kitchen counter, still open to his email. I wasn't snooping. Not at first. I was just looking for the hotel confirmation because of course I was still the one packing for him, still the one making sure he didn't forget his toothbrush or his favorite cologne. That's when I saw it. A receipt from the airline. 2 first-class tickets. Mark Bennett. Jessica Holloway. The name hit me like a slap. Jessica. The new marketing director at his firm. The one who laughed a little too loud at his jokes during the company Christmas party. The one whose hand lingered on his arm just a second too long. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I did something worse. I started calculating. He'd used my credit card points. The ones I'd saved for years. The ones I'd planned to use for our dream trip. And now he was taking her. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. I needed air. I needed to think. But before I could storm out, his phone buzzed on the counter. A text lit up the screen. Can't wait to see you in Bali, baby. 3 more days. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. Hollow, humorless. Baby. He hadn't called me that in years. I locked myself in the bathroom and turned on the shower so I wouldn't hear myself scream. The water ran, steaming up the mirror until my reflection disappeared. Good. I didn't want to see myself right now. But then clarity. Mark had made one mistake. One huge mistake. He'd forgotten about Daniel Reyes. Captain Daniel Reyes. The pilot Mark had fired 6 months ago for being too old to fly modern jets. The man Mark had humiliated in front of the entire company at that Go-Doffel brunch. The man whose career he destroyed with a single email. I opened my laptop and typed his name into Google. A few clicks later, I found him, now flying private jets for some of the wealthiest clients in the country. And as luck would have it, he was based out of the same airport Mark would be flying from. I didn't hesitate. I pulled up the airline's website, entered my miles, and upgraded my ticket. Not just to first class. To the seat right next to Daniel Reyes. The cursor hovered over the confirm purchase button. My breath came fast. This was crazy. This was reckless. This was exactly what Mark deserved. I clicked it. The confirmation email hit my inbox seconds later. I stared at it, my heart pounding. Game on. The game begins. The champagne flute felt cold in my hand as I settled into seat 2B. I could feel Mark's eyes burning holes into the back of my head from 3 rows up. The hum of the airplane engines matched the adrenaline buzzing through my veins. I was really doing this. Daniel leaned closer, his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, mixing with the sterile airplane air. You realize we have 8 hours of flying time ahead of us with your husband and his. He glanced toward the front of the cabin, companion sitting close enough to throw peanuts at us. I took a slow sip of champagne, letting the bubbles dance on my tongue before answering. I'm counting on every minute of it. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile. More champagne, ma'am? Please. I held out my glass, then turned to Daniel. You should have some too. We're celebrating. Daniel raised an eyebrow, but accepted the drink. And what exactly are we celebrating? Our new partnership. I clinked my glass against his. And the fact that in about. I checked my watch dramatically. 7 hours and 45 minutes. Mark Bennett is going to wish he'd never set foot on this plane. A slow grin spread across Daniel's face. It transformed him, the stern, professional pilot suddenly looking 10 years younger. I think I'm going to enjoy this flight more than I expected. The first hour passed with tense small talk. Daniel told me about his new job flying private jets for celebrities. I pretended to be fascinated while acutely aware of every movement from Mark's row. 3 times I caught him turning around to stare. Jessica had stopped giggling. When the meal service began, I saw my opening. Excuse me, I called to the flight attendant sweetly. Could we possibly move our meal service up? My companion here gets airsick if he doesn't eat at regular intervals. I patted Daniel's arm affectionately. Daniel coughed into his napkin. Do I now? The flight attendant nodded sympathetically. Of course, ma'am. We'll serve you first. As she walked away, Daniel muttered. Airsick? I've flown through monsoons. Just play along, I whispered back. Watch this. When our meals arrived before everyone else's, I made sure to laugh just a little too loudly at something Daniel said. I leaned in close, letting my hair fall forward as if sharing an intimate secret. From Mark's perspective, it would look downright cozy. It worked better than I'd hoped. By the time the main cabin was being served, Mark was out of his seat and looming over our row. We need to talk, he ground out through clenched teeth. I blinked up at him innocently. About what, darling? Your trip? Your friend. I let my gaze flick to Jessica, who was watching the scene with wide eyes. Mark's face turned an impressive shade of red. Not here. He glanced at Daniel, then back to me. The lavatory. Now. Daniel started to stand, but I placed a hand on his arm. It's fine. To Mark, I said, 5 minutes. The airplane lavatory was barely big enough for one person, let alone 2 angry spouses. Mark crowded in after me, his breath hot on my face. What the hell are you playing at, Claire? I crossed my arms. I could ask you the same question. Bali, Mark? Really? You couldn't even pick an original destination? You weren't supposed to find out like this. Oh. I cocked my head. How was I supposed to find out? Were you going to send me a postcard? Having a great time. Wish you were her. Mark ran a hand through his hair. It's not what you think. It never is. I straightened my blouse. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your seat. You're going to smile at your girlfriend. And you're going to pretend everything is fine. Because if you don't, I lowered my voice. I'll make sure the entire board knows about your little accounting discrepancies from last quarter. Mark's face went slack with shock. You wouldn't. Try me. For a long moment, we just stared at each other in that cramped, smelly airplane bathroom. Then Mark stepped back, his shoulders slumping in defeat. You've changed, Claire. I reached for the door handle. No, Mark. I just finally woke up. When I returned to my seat, Daniel was pretending to read a magazine. He didn't look up as I sat down, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Everything go okay back there? I buckled my seatbelt with a satisfying click. Better than expected. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. Now tell me more about those safety reports Mark wanted you to falsify. I think the board members would find that very enlightening. Daniel's eyes gleamed with something dangerous. I thought you'd never ask. As the plane cut through the night sky, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about rediscovering the woman I'd buried under years of being Mrs. Mark Bennett. And as Daniel began laying out exactly how we were going to bring my husband down, I felt something I hadn't in years, hope. 30,000 feet of truth. The drone of the airplane engines became a steady backdrop to Daniel's quiet confession. His voice was so low I had to lean in close, catching hints of his cologne, bergamot, and something smokier underneath. It was distracting, but not nearly as distracting as what he was telling me. Mark didn't fire me because I was too old, Daniel said, his fingers tracing the rim of his whiskey glass. He fired me because I refused to sign off on maintenance reports for planes that hadn't been properly inspected. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's criminal. Daniel's dark eyes met mine. And highly profitable. Cutting corners on maintenance saves thousands per plane. Multiply that across an entire fleet. He let the implication hang in the air between us. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This was bigger than an affair. This was about people's lives. Do you have proof? Reaching into his jacket pocket, Daniel pulled out a thumb drive. Every falsified report. Every ignored safety concern. All time-stamped and backed up in 3 different locations. He placed it in my palm, his fingers warm against mine. I've been waiting for the right moment to use this. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. Why tell me now? Because you're already in the game, Claire. His gaze flicked toward the front of the cabin where Mark and Jessica sat. And from what I just saw in that lavatory, you play to win. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, making the thumb drive dig into my palm. I closed my fingers around it tighter. What exactly are you suggesting? Daniel leaned back in his seat, studying me. Your husband's company is about to merge with Pacific Air. If these reports go public before the deal closes, the merger would collapse. I finished, my pulse quickening. Mark would lose everything. Not just him. Daniel's voice turned grim. The board members who looked the other way. The executives who pressured pilots to fly unsafe planes. All of them would go down. I stared at the thumb drive, my mind whirling with possibilities. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. For Daniel. For every passenger who'd unknowingly flown on those planes. For me. A burst of laughter from Mark's row snapped me back to the present. Jessica was feeding him a strawberry, her fingers lingering near his lips. The sight made my stomach turn. When does the merger close? I asked, tearing my gaze away. Friday. Daniel checked his watch, which gives us about 72 hours after we land. I took a deep breath, making my decision. Then we'd better work fast. Slipping the thumb drive into my purse, I caught Daniel's eye. First things first, we need to get off this plane without Mark following us. Daniel's lips curved into a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. I might have an idea about that. As he explained his plan, I found myself studying his profile, the strong jawline, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes from years of squinting into sunlight at 30,000 feet. There was a quiet strength to him that Mark had never possessed. A steadiness. The seatbelt sign pinged as we began our descent. Daniel reached for my hand, his grip firm. Last chance to back out. I squeezed back. Not a chance. When we landed, everything happened quickly. While the other passengers stood to retrieve their carry-ons, Daniel and I slipped into the crew's exit route, courtesy of a friend of his who still worked for the airline. Within minutes, we were in a taxi speeding away from the airport, Mark none the wiser. The humid Bali air rushed through the open windows as we drove toward our hotel. Daniel had booked us rooms at a different resort than Mark's, someplace secluded where we could plan our next moves. You okay? Daniel asked as the taxi wound through lush green hills. I realized I was still clutching my purse with the thumb drive inside. I will be. Turning to face him, I felt something unexpected, not just anger or determination, but excitement. So, where do we start? Daniel's answering grin was all the reply I needed. The whiskey packed. The resort was quieter than I expected, just the sound of waves breaking against the cliffs below and the occasional rustle of palm leaves. Our private villa stood at the edge of the property, surrounded by jungle on 3 sides. Secluded. Safe. Daniel tipped the bellhop and closed the door behind him, the latch clicking with finality. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. We should talk. I dropped my bag onto the plush sofa, the thumb drive still burning a hole in my purse. That's why we're here, isn't it? He moved to the minibar, pulling out 2 glasses and a bottle of expensive-looking whiskey. You drink this neat or with ice? Neat. I watched as he poured, the amber liquid catching the golden hour light. You seem awfully calm for someone about to take down an airline executive. Daniel handed me the glass, our fingers brushing. I've had months to think about this. You've had, he checked his watch, about 4 hours. I took a slow sip, letting the whiskey warm my throat. I don't need time to know Mark deserves this. Daniel studied me over the rim of his glass. This isn't just about the affair, is it? The question caught me off guard. I walked to the balcony, where the ocean stretched endlessly under the fading sun. The affair is just the latest betrayal. Mark's been lying to me for years. About money, about work, about who he really is. I turned back to face Daniel. But you already knew that, didn't you? He joined me at the railing, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I knew the man who fired me wasn't the same when you married. The truth of that settled between us. Somewhere along the way, Mark had become someone else entirely, and I'd been too blind or too trusting to see it. So, what's the plan? I asked, steering us back to the present. Daniel pulled out his phone and opened an email. Pacific Air's board meets Friday at noon their time. That gives us until Thursday night to get this evidence to their legal team. He zoomed in on an attachment, a list of names. These are the key players. The ones who will actually care about the safety violations, not just the stock price. I scanned the names, stopping at one I recognized. Lena Cho. She's on the Safety Oversight Committee. Daniel nodded. And she's here in Bali for the pre-merger negotiations. A thrill shot through me. You want to approach her directly. It's risky, he admitted. But if we can get her alone, show her the evidence before Mark even knows where. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket. Mark's name flashed across the screen. Daniel's jaw tightened. Are you going to answer that? I stared at the caller ID, my thumb hovering. Then I declined the call and silenced my phone.
No.
A slow, approving smile spread across Daniel's face. He raised his glass. To new alliances. I clinked mine against his. And long overdue justice. We drank in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to deep purple. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then Daniel's phone pinged. He frowned at the screen. Lena's having dinner tomorrow night at the Cliffside restaurant. Private room. Just her and 2 security guys. I finished my whiskey in one burning swallow. Then that's where we'll make our move. Daniel's eyes met mine, serious now. Once we do this, there's no going back. I thought of Mark's empty promises, of the years I'd wasted believing in him. I stopped going back a long time ago. The ocean roared below us as we sealed our pact, not with a handshake, but with something far more dangerous. A shared smile. The cliffside gambit. The dress was tighter than I usually wore, the slit higher, the neckline lower. I turned in front of the mirror, adjusting the emerald green fabric that matched the glint in my eyes. Revenge looked good on me. Daniel knocked on my villa door precisely at 7. When I opened it, his gaze traveled down my body in one slow, appreciative sweep before snapping back to my face. You clean up nice, Bennett. So do you.
And he did.
The navy suit hugged his broad shoulders perfectly, the crisp white shirt open at the collar just enough to reveal a hint of tan skin. Pilot skin, kissed by sun at high altitudes. He held up a small earpiece. For communication. Once you're inside, I'll be listening through your phone. I slipped it into my ear, the tiny device barely noticeable beneath my hair. And if this goes south? Daniel's hand brushed my waist as he adjusted the hidden microphone clipped to my dress. Then I come in guns blazing. Literally?
He smirked.
Figuratively. Mostly. The Cliffside restaurant perched on limestone cliffs overlooking the Indian Ocean, all glass walls and candlelight. Daniel parked our rented scooter 100 yards away, close enough to react, far enough to avoid detection. Remember, he murmured as we approached the entrance, Lena Cho is sharp. Don't oversell it. I squeezed his hand once before letting go. Just get me in the door. The hostess eyed my dress approvingly. Reservation? I'm meeting Lena Cho. She's expecting me.
A lie.
But one that bought me 30 seconds of hesitation before the hostess led me through the dining room. I caught glimpses of my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, a confident stranger walking toward destiny. Lena sat alone at a private corner table, her sleek black bob framing a face that radiated quiet authority. When she saw me approaching, her chopsticks paused mid-bite. "Miss Cho." I extended my hand. "Claire Bennett. I apologize for intruding, but I have information about Pacific Air's merger that you need to see." Lena didn't take my hand. "You're Mark Bennett's wife."
Yes.
"And that's exactly why you should listen to me." I slid into the chair opposite her without invitation, placing the thumb drive on the table between us. "This contains evidence of deliberate safety violations your merger partner has been covering up." Lena's security detail shifted closer. She waved them back with a subtle hand motion. "Why would you betray your own husband?" The question should have stung. Instead, I felt nothing but cold certainty. Because some things are more important than marriage vows. Like not letting people die for profit. For the first time, Lena's expression flickered. She picked up the thumb drive, turning it over in her fingers. "This is a serious accusation. Which is why I brought proof." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Check the maintenance logs for Flight 227 last November. Then compare them to Captain Reyes' official report." A waiter approached. Lena tucked the thumb drive into her clutch with practiced ease. "We're fine for now, thank you." When we were alone again, she studied me with new intensity. "Reyes. The pilot Bennett fired. The pilot who refused to falsify records." I corrected. "The man your company is about to make very rich in a wrongful termination lawsuit." Lena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me. "You realize if this is true, the merger collapses. Your husband loses everything." I met her gaze without flinching. "I'm counting on it." Something like respect flashed in Lena's eyes. She stood abruptly. "Wait here." As she disappeared toward the restrooms, Daniel's voice whispered through my earpiece. "She's making a call."
Good.
That means she's taking it seriously. I sipped the water the waiter had left, trying to ignore the way my pulse thundered in my ears. The restaurant's glass walls reflected the ocean beyond, dark and endless and unpredictable, like the consequences of what we'd just set in motion. Lena returned 5 minutes later, her expression unreadable. She sat down, folded her hands, and delivered the verdict. "Our legal team is reviewing the files now. If this checks out." She didn't need to finish. The satisfied curve of her lips said everything. I stood to leave, but Lena caught my wrist. "One question, Mrs. Bennett. Why come to me? You could have gone public, caused a much bigger scandal." I thought of Daniel waiting outside, of the years he'd lost because of Mark's greed. "Because you actually care about safety. And because," I added with a smile, "I wanted Mark to see it coming." The walk back through the restaurant felt lighter. The earpiece crackled. "Well," Daniel's voice was tense. I waited until I was outside, until the ocean air hit my face and the stars blinked overhead. Then I whispered the 2 sweetest words I'd ever said. "It's done." Daniel emerged from the shadows, his grin visible even in the dim light. He pulled me into a fierce hug, his heartbeat thundering against mine. "You are brilliant." As we climbed onto the scooter, his hands steady on the handlebars, I realized something terrifying and wonderful. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The Phoenix moment. The scooter tires crunched over gravel as we pulled up to our villa, the salt-heavy wind tangling my hair into wild knots. Daniel killed the engine, but neither of us moved to dismount. The night hummed with possibility, with danger, with the kind of electricity that comes right before a storm breaks. "Think he knows yet?" Daniel's voice was low, his hands still gripping the handlebars where I could feel the tension radiating from his body. I slid off the scooter, my dress fluttering around my thighs. "Mark? Oh, he knows." The proof came 30 seconds later, when my silenced phone lit up with his 12th missed call. The screen flashed angry red, his favorite color, apparently. Daniel took the phone from me, his thumb hovering over the power button. "You want to answer it?" I shook my head. Let him stew. He'll taste better that way. Daniel laughed, the sound rich and warm in the humid air. But it died quickly when headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating our villa in stark white light. A black SUV skidded to a stop 20 feet away. My body recognized him before my mind did. The way he slammed the car door, the predatory stride, the entitled set of his shoulders. Mark. Jessica wasn't with him. Daniel stepped in front of me instinctively, his pilot's reflexes putting himself between me and the threat. I placed a hand on his arm and stepped around him. This was my fight. Mark stopped just short of punching distance, his face mottled with rage. You unbelievable bitch. Spittle flew from his lips. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I tilted my head, feigning thought. Let's see. Exposed your criminal negligence? Tanked your precious merger? Oh. I snapped my fingers. And ruined your little sex vacation. Did I miss anything? Mark's hand twitched like he wanted to strike me. Daniel shifted subtly, ready to intervene. You're dead, Claire. Mark's voice shook with fury. You think some disgraced pilot is going to protect you? I'll destroy you both. I smiled then, a slow, terrible thing that made Mark falter. That's the thing, Mark. You already destroyed us. Him with your lies. Me with your betrayal. And look at us now. I gestured between Daniel and me. Stronger than you ever made us. Mark's eyes darted to Daniel, then back to me. Something ugly twisted his features. You're sleeping with him, Daniel answered before I could. Not yet. The sheer audacity of it, the casual challenge in his tone, made Mark blink. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Mark recovered quickly, jabbing a finger at me. This isn't over. I have friends in high places. And I have proof in multiple places, I countered. Try me, Mark. I'd love to see you explain to a judge why you falsified safety reports. For the first time in our marriage, Mark had nothing to say. The realization was more intoxicating than the whiskey we'd drunk earlier. He turned on his heel, marching back to the SUV. At the door, he spun back, his face shadowed. You'll regret this, Claire. I waited until his tires spit gravel at us, until his taillights disappeared down the jungle road. Only then did I let my knees buckle. Daniel caught me before I hit the ground, his arms solid around my waist. Easy there, tiger. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in the scent of salt and leather and him. The adrenaline crash left me shaking. Did I just do that? Daniel's chuckle vibrated against my cheek. Oh, you definitely did that. Inside the villa, Daniel poured 2 fingers of whiskey, neat, just how I liked it, and pressed the glass into my hands. Drink. You've earned it. The liquor burned going down, but the warmth it left behind was comforting. I stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the moonlit ocean, trying to process what had just happened. Daniel joined me at the window, close but not touching. What now? I turned the question over in my mind. The merger would collapse. Mark would likely face legal consequences. And me? I was free in a way I hadn't been in years. I don't know, I admitted. And for the first time, that uncertainty felt exhilarating instead of terrifying. Daniel's fingers brushed mine as he took the empty glass. For what it's worth, watching you eviscerate him was the hottest thing I've ever seen. I laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep and forgotten. Stick around, Captain. I'm just getting started. The way he looked at me then, like I was a storm worth chasing, like I was the horizon itself, made my breath catch. Somewhere out there, Mark was raging. But here, in this quiet villa by the sea, something new was being born from the ashes of my old life. And it was beautiful. The aftermath. The morning sun painted gold stripes across the villa floor when I woke to the smell of coffee and something citrusy. Daniel stood at the kitchenette, barefoot in wrinkled linen pants, squeezing fresh lime into a bowl of tropical fruit. The sight was so domestic it made my chest ache. You cook? I rasped, my voice still thick with sleep. He turned, a grin tugging at his lips. I survive. There's a difference. I patted across the cool tile, accepting the coffee he offered. Our fingers brushed, just like they had a dozen times since we'd met. But this time, neither of us pulled away. The silence stretched, comfortable and charged all at once. Daniel cleared his throat first. Lena emailed. The merger's off. I exhaled through my nose, watching the steam from my coffee swirl. How's Mark taking it? According to Bloomberg, he's holed up in his hotel room refusing to comment. Daniel's smirk was downright wicked. His stock dropped 40% in pre-market trading. I should have felt victorious, vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Daniel's fingers grazed my elbow.
Hey.
You okay? I stared into my coffee, watching the dark, liquid ripple. I just spent 10 years married to a stranger. The admission hung between us, raw and fragile. Daniel didn't offer empty platitudes. Didn't tell me it would be okay. He simply slid the fruit bowl toward me and said, "Eat something. Then we're getting out of here." An hour later, we were speeding along coastal roads on our rented scooter, the wind whipping my hair into a frenzy. Daniel drove with one hand on the throttle, the other resting lightly on my thigh to steady me. Every curve in the road pressed me back against his chest. Every bump sent sparks shooting through my veins. We stopped at a secluded beach, all white sand and water, so clear I could see fish darting between my toes. Daniel spread out a towel and produced 2 beers from his backpack, condensation already dripping down the glass. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. I took a long pull, the beer crisp and cold. "Is this where you tell me you have a secret talent for mixology too?" Daniel stretched out on the towel, the sun painting his torso in shades of gold.
Nah.
Just good at reading people. His eyes met mine, steady and sure. "You needed this. Space to breathe." The simple understanding undid me. We spent the day like that, swimming in water warm as bathwater, sharing stories that had nothing to do with Mark or mergers or revenge. Daniel told me about his first solo flight at 17. I confessed my childhood dream of opening a beachside bar. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in violent pinks and oranges, Daniel reached for my hand. "Claire?"
My phone rang.
The spell shattered. It was my lawyer. Mark was filing for divorce and contesting our prenup. Daniel's jaw tightened when I hung up. "Let me guess. He's trying to take you for everything." I stared at the crashing waves, the salt air suddenly suffocating. "He can try." Daniel stood abruptly, pulling me to my feet. "Come on." "Where?" "Somewhere with stronger drinks." The beachside bar was all bamboo and fairy lights, reggae music blending with the sound of the surf. Daniel ordered us 2 rum punches, extra strong. We drank. We danced. We pretended just for one night that the outside world didn't exist. At some point, between the 3rd drink and the 4th, Daniel's hand found the small of my back. His breath was warm against my ear. "You're incredible, you know that?" I turned in his arms, our faces inches apart. The music faded to a dull roar, the other patrons blurring into insignificance. There was only Daniel, his scent, his heat, the way his pupils dilated when I licked my lips. Then my phone buzzed again. Mark. Again. Daniel stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "You should get that." I silenced my phone and tossed it into my bag.
No.
I shouldn't. The tension between us crackled like live wire. Daniel searched my face, his expression unreadable. "Claire, don't." I pressed a finger to his lips.
Just don't think.
"Not tonight." For a heartbeat, I thought he'd refuse. Then his arms were around me, his mouth crashing into mine with a decade's worth of pent-up longing. The taste of rum and salt and Daniel exploded across my tongue, and for the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be. The reckoning. The first light of dawn painted Daniel's bare shoulders in gold as I traced the scars along his back, each one a story I'd yet to learn. His breathing changed the moment my fingers reached the jagged line near his ribs. "Turbulence," he murmured without opening his eyes. "Over the Andes, 5 years ago." I pressed my lips to the scar, tasting salt and history. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. Mark's 18th call since last night. The screen flashed with a new voicemail notification, but I left it untouched. Some things could wait. Daniel rolled over, catching my wrist as I reached for him again. We should check the news. The reluctance in his voice mirrored my own. For these few stolen hours, we'd been just Claire and Daniel. No scandals, no revenge plots, just skin and whispered secrets. But reality waited outside our bamboo cocoon. He grabbed the remote, turning on the wall-mounted TV with a click. The screen filled with Mark's face, perfectly composed despite the dark circles under his eyes. A Chiron beneath him screamed, "Airline executive accuses fired pilot of fraud." "Categorically deny these baseless allegations," Mark was saying to a crowd of reporters at some impromptu press conference. "The real story here is a disgruntled former employee working with my estranged wife to sabotage this merger." Daniel went very still beside me. "He's making this personal." On screen, Mark produced a folded document. "This affidavit from our lead mechanic proves Captain Reyes had a documented history of cutting corners on safety checks." I sat up so fast the sheets tangled around my legs. "That's a lie." Daniel muted the TV, his face grim. "Doesn't matter if it is. By the time we prove it's fabricated, the damage will be done." The phone rang again, this time Daniel's. Lena Cho's name flashed on the caller ID. He answered on speaker. "Turn on CNN," she said without preamble. We didn't need to. Mark's smarmy grin filled the screen as he shook hands with Pacific Air's CEO. The Chiron now read, "Merger back on track after scandal." Lena's voice turned razor-sharp. "Meet me at the private terminal in 90 minutes. We're not done yet." The line went dead. Daniel was already out of bed, pulling on yesterday's clothes with military efficiency. I watched the way his hands trembled slightly as he buttoned his shirt, not from fear, but from barely contained rage. I dressed in silence, the emerald green dress from last night now feeling like a costume. My fingers hesitated over my wedding ring, still on my finger after all these months. With a sharp twist, I yanked it off and left it on the nightstand. The taxi ride to the airport passed in tense silence. Daniel gripped my hand like an anchor as Bali's jungles blurred past the window. The radio chattered with updates about Mark's triumphant vindication, each word another twist of the knife. Lena waited at the charter terminal, her crisp white suit making her look like an avenging angel. Without a word, she handed Daniel a tablet playing security footage from Mark's office. The timestamp showed yesterday afternoon, hours before our beachside drinks. Mark sat at his desk, dictating to a nervous-looking mechanic. "You'll sign this affidavit saying Reyes pressured you to skip inspections, or I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Where did you?" "Doesn't matter." Lena snatched back the tablet. "This goes public in 3 hours, right as Pacific Air's board votes. But you two need to be stateside when it hits." She gestured to the waiting jet, its engines already humming. As we boarded, I caught a glimpse of ourselves reflected in the plane's glossy exterior, Daniel tall and protective at my side, my chin lifted with newfound defiance. We looked like different people from the couple who'd arrived in Bali. The cabin door sealed with a hiss. Daniel sank into the cream leather seat beside me, his knee bouncing with restless energy. "Once this video drops, it'll destroy him," I finished. Daniel turned my face toward him, his thumb brushing my cheek. "You ready for that?" I thought of 10 years of gaslit arguments, of silenced doubts, of slowly disappearing into Mark's shadow. My fingers found Daniel's, intertwining naturally. "Let's end this." As the jet roared down the runway, pressing us back into our seats, I didn't glance back at Bali disappearing below. My eyes were fixed ahead, on the horizon, on the future, on the man whose hand in mine felt like coming home. The plane banked sharply, sunlight flooding the cabin. Somewhere below, Mark was probably celebrating his victory. Little did he know, we were just getting started. Final approach. The private jet touched down at Teterboro Airport just as the first raindrops splattered against the windows. New York greeted us with its usual indifference, gray skies, honking traffic, and the constant hum of a city that never stopped moving. I tightened my grip on Daniel's hand as the plane taxied to a stop. Lena stood before the cabin door opened, her stiletto heels planted firmly on the carpet. The video goes public in 17 minutes. Mark's currently holed up at the St. Regis with Pacific Air's board. She handed me a manila envelope. You'll want to see this first. Inside were divorce papers, already signed by Mark, with every single clause in my favor. The generous settlement, the apartment, even my grandmother's china he'd always hated. All mine. Daniel peered over my shoulder. That's suspiciously cooperative of him, because he doesn't know about the video yet. Lena checked her diamond-encrusted watch. Once it drops, these papers will be worth less than the ink used to print them. The cabin door opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Cold wind whipped through the opening, carrying the scent of jet fuel and city rain. I squared my shoulders and stepped out onto the stairs. New York's skyline loomed in the distance, half obscured by low-hanging clouds. Somewhere in that concrete jungle, Mark was probably rehearsing his victory speech. Little did he know his world was about to implode. The black SUV waiting on the tarmac had barely pulled onto the highway when my phone buzzed with a CNN alert. The video had gone live early. I turned the screen toward Daniel and Lena. Mark's recorded voice filled the car's interior. You'll sign this affidavit saying Reyes pressured you to skip inspections. Lena smirked. And there goes the merger. By the time we reached Manhattan, the story had exploded. News choppers circled the St. Regis, where Pacific Air's emergency board meeting was underway. Our driver navigated through the growing media circus, pulling into the hotel's underground garage. The elevator ride to the 38th floor felt interminable. Daniel stood close behind me, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. Last chance to back out, he murmured against my hair. I watched our reflection in the polished elevator doors. A woman I barely recognized stared back, her eyes fierce, her posture unbreakable. Not a chance. The boardroom doors burst open just as we stepped off the elevator. Mark stood framed in the doorway, his face ashen as Pacific Air's board members streamed past him, ignoring his sputtered protests. When he saw me, his eyes widened in something almost like fear. Claire. My name sounded foreign on his lips. This isn't what it looks like. I held up the divorce papers. Sign these.
Now.
Or the next video goes public. Mark's jaw worked. What next video? Daniel stepped forward, pulling a second thumb drive from his pocket. The one where you ordered the maintenance crew to falsify reports on Flight 227 after I'd grounded it. The color drained from Mark's face. He looked between us, finally understanding the depth of his miscalculation. You set me up. No, Mark. I moved closer, close enough to smell the stale whiskey on his breath. You did that all by yourself. The signing took less than 3 minutes. Mark scrawled his name with shaking hands, his expensive pen scratching against the paper. When it was done, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Daniel took my arm as we turned to leave. Mark's voice stopped us at the door. Did you ever love me? The question hung in the air, pathetic and small. I didn't turn around. I loved the man I thought you were. The elevator doors closed on Mark's shattered expression. As we descended, Daniel pressed a kiss to my temple. Where to now? I leaned into him, the weight of 10 years slipping from my shoulders. Somewhere with better champagne. Outside, the rain had stopped. A break in the clouds sent a single shaft of sunlight cutting through the New York gloom, illuminating the sidewalk before us. I took Daniel's hand, and together we stepped into the light. Clear skies ahead. The champagne bubbles danced in my flute, catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows of our new apartment. Our apartment. The words still felt foreign, exhilarating. Daniel moved through the spacious loft, unpacking boxes with the same precision he used to navigate turbulent skies. You're staring, he said without looking up, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. I'm admiring, I corrected, taking another sip. 6 weeks had passed since the showdown at the St. Regis. 6 weeks since Mark's very public downfall, the revoked merger, the SEC investigation, the humiliating tabloid headlines. 6 weeks since Daniel and I had stepped into this new life together. Daniel paused, holding up a framed photo from one of the boxes, a younger version of himself in uniform, standing proudly beside a small Cessna. Where should we put this? I crossed the room, taking the photo from his hands. My fingers brushed his, sending that now familiar electric current up my arm. Right here, I said, placing it on the mantel beside a photo of me at my boutique's grand opening. The two images side by side, our pasts, now part of a shared future. Daniel's arms circled my waist from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. It fits.
The doorbell rang.
Lena stood in the hallway, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon and a manila folder. Don't look so surprised. I come bearing gifts. She swept past us into the apartment, her sharp eyes taking in the half-unpacked boxes, the cozy disarray of new beginnings. Without ceremony, she dropped the folder onto the kitchen counter. Mark's final settlement papers. Signed, sealed, and heavily in your favor. I flipped through the documents, the apartment, the stocks, even the vintage Jaguar he'd loved more than me. All mine. He didn't fight it? Lena popped the champagne with a practiced twist. After that second video went viral, he was lucky to avoid jail time. She poured 3 glasses, handing one to Daniel. Speaking of which, Pacific Air wants to talk to you about a consulting position. Seems their new CEO values integrity over profit margins. Daniel's fingers tightened around his glass. I'll think about it. Lena arched a perfectly sculpted brow. Think fast. They're waiting for your call. With that, she downed her champagne in one elegant gulp and headed for the door. Oh, and Claire? She tossed a business card onto the entryway table. That boutique chain I mentioned? They're expecting your proposal by Monday. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving silence in her wake. Daniel exhaled sharply. She's exhausting. I laughed, picking up the card. Lux Collective, chief buyer. My stomach fluttered. She's also never wrong. Daniel took the card from me, studying it before tucking it into my pocket. Monday, he agreed. But this weekend... He pulled me close, his voice dropping to a whisper. This weekend is ours. The setting sun painted the Manhattan skyline in fiery hues as we slow danced between unpacked boxes, our bare feet silent on the hardwood. Somewhere below, the city pulsed with its usual relentless energy, but up here, in this moment, there was only us. Daniel's lips brushed my temple. Happy. I thought of the long, winding road that had led us here, the betrayals, the risks, the leaps of faith. My fingers traced the scar on his ribs, the one from the Andes. I murmured against his chest. As long as we're flying together. His answering smile outshone the city lights. Turbulence. The shrill ring of my phone shattered the peaceful Sunday morning. I fumbled for it blindly, my fingers brushing against Daniel's bare shoulder as I reached across the nightstand. The screen flashed with an unknown number. Don't answer it, Daniel mumbled into his pillow, his arm tightening around my waist. I almost didn't, but some gut instinct, made me swipe accept. Claire Bennett. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. I sat up abruptly, the sheets pooling around me. Yes, this is Victoria Price from the New York Times. I'm writing a piece on whistleblowers in the aviation industry and wanted to get your perspective on. I hung up. Daniel was fully awake now, propped up on one elbow. His hair was adorably mussed from sleep, but his eyes were sharp with concern. Reporter? I nodded, my throat tight. The media frenzy had died down weeks ago, or so I'd thought.
My phone buzzed again.
Another unknown number. Then another. By the 5th call, I powered it off completely and tossed it across the room. Daniel caught my shaking hands in his.
Hey.
Breathe. I thought we were past this, I whispered. The morning sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows suddenly felt too bright, too exposing. Daniel pressed a kiss to my knuckles.
We are.
This is just residual noise. But the noise didn't stop. At brunch, a photographer snapped pictures of us through the cafe window. On our walk through Central Park, a news van trailed us at a discreet distance. By Monday morning, my inbox was flooded with interview requests. Lux Collective's sleek offices should have been a refuge, but even here, the whispers followed me. I caught snippets as I passed glass-walled conference rooms. The woman who took down her CEO husband. That viral video with the pilot. My new boss, a razor-thin woman named Evelyn, studied me over her half-moon glasses during our introductory meeting. Your notoriety could be an asset, she said bluntly. Or a liability. The words stung more than I expected. I'm here for my taste in fashion, not my personal life. Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. In this business, darling, they're one and the same. That night, I found Daniel pacing our living room, his phone clenched in his fist. Pacific Air rescinded their offer, he said without preamble. I froze in the doorway, my shopping bag slipping from my fingers.
What?
Why?
He turned his phone toward me.
The headline screamed, Disgraced Pilot's Romantic Ties to Whistleblower Wife Raise Ethics Concerns. I reached for him, but he stepped back just half a pace, but it might as well have been miles. This is exactly what I was afraid of, he said quietly. They don't see me as a pilot anymore. Just as a tabloid story. The hurt in his voice cracked something open inside me. I crossed the distance between us, framing his face in my hands. Then we'll write our own damn story. For the first time all day, Daniel smiled, that slow, dangerous smile I loved. What did you have in mind? I grabbed my laptop, opening a blank document. The cursor blinked expectantly. We tell the truth. All of it. On our terms. Daniel's arms circled me from behind as I typed the first line. This isn't a story about scandal. It's about second chances. Outside our windows, the city lights twinkled like distant runway markers, guiding us home through the storm. Landing. The morning our op-ed went live in the Times, I woke to find Daniel already awake, staring at his phone with an unreadable expression. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting stripes of gold across our rumpled sheets. Bad news? I asked, my voice still rough with sleep. Daniel turned the screen toward me. The headline read, When the Truth is Your Only Option, a love story at 30,000 feet. Below it, our bylines stood side by side, Claire Bennett and Daniel Reyes. I scrambled upright, my heart pounding. They published it. Not just published. Daniel's grin was electric. It's trending. My phone, silenced since the media storm began, buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. Hundreds of notifications flooded in, messages from old friends, interview requests, which I promptly deleted, and, most surprisingly, an email from Evelyn at Lux Collective. Your honesty is exactly what modern fashion needs. Let's discuss your new role heading our ethical sourcing initiative.
E.
Daniel's phone rang. Pacific Air's new CEO appeared on the caller ID. He answered on speaker. Reyes, the CEO said without preamble. We screwed up. That consulting offer still stands, with complete creative control this time. I squeezed Daniel's hand as he replied, I'll think about it. But when he hung up, I saw the spark in his eyes, the one that appeared whenever he talked about flying. You're going to take it, I said, already knowing the answer. Daniel pulled me into his lap, his lips brushing my temple. Only if you're okay with some travel. I thought of the boutique chain waiting for my proposal, of the life we'd built here in New York. Then, I thought of the look on Daniel's face when he talked about the sky. I've always wanted to see Paris in the spring, I murmured against his lips. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The media frenzy died down, replaced by something more meaningful, real conversations about corporate accountability, about second chances, about love after betrayal. On a crisp April morning, I stood on the tarmac at JFK, watching Daniel perform the pre-flight check on a gleaming new Pacific Air jet. His captain's stripes gleamed in the sunlight. Lena appeared beside me, her ever-present tablet tucked under one arm. You know, most women would be nervous dating a pilot. I smiled as Daniel waved at me from the cockpit. This woman isn't most women. The truth was simple. We'd both been lost. Me in a marriage that was never real, Daniel in a career taken from him. But somewhere between the lies and the fallout, we'd found something true. As the plane's engines roared to life, I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the steady beat of my heart. No more turbulence. Just clear skies ahead.
The end.
Did Claire and Daniel's journey resonate with you? This story proves that even the deepest betrayals can lead to beautiful new beginnings. If you enjoyed their transformation from heartbreak to healing, hit that like button and follow for more uplifting tales of resilience. Want to be notified when we publish our next inspiring story? Turn on notifications so you never miss out. What kind of stories would you like to see next? Comment below. We read every one.